How you doing, man?
Doing good, doing good.
Um, what have you been up to today, man? Just ladder.
Yeah, I was streaming a bit earlier, like 4 hours of ladder.
Oh, cool. How'd it go?
Not much else really. So. Lost a
D-
bit more than I would have liked.
Does seeing Big Gabe's kind of dedication to the stream make you think a bit more about maybe trying to stream a bit more, or does it seem a little bit too hard to do while you're practicing?
Yeah, he streams a lot. Like, I don't think I'm gonna get there.
He streams
I
a
would
crazy
be,
amount. It's insane, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. I would be happy if I could like get, I don't know, 20 hours a week or so. Um,
It's I was watching him. You killed him. He tried to do a timing attack, and you went single forge, and he was like,
oh yeah.
this is Korean style. He's like, I can't beat this while I commentate. It's like I can't. No, it's like
Yeah.
Showtime. Showtime's too good. But that's cool, man. Awesome. So obviously, Home Story Cup was kind of a wild tournament. It's not like you watch every game, especially when you're there in the water slide half the time. But I'm trying to actually remember. I'm just getting the replays organized over here as well. Obviously, it's old patch. Do you have the replays downloaded on your computer, by the way?
Yeah, I do.
You do? Okay, awesome. I'm just getting mine into the right folders right now. But
Mhm.
was there any particular? Sorry, just getting that. Any particular matches you had? I'm trying to remember because I don't think I saw any of your Protoss vs Zerg matches directly. Did you have any like interesting run-ins or anything like that? Any really good matches?
I had one long game against Serral. Other than that, I played Bly, and then I had one all in against the second game against Serral. So it was only like one game, which was like
Oh, the Glaive
somewhat interesting.
Adepts.
Yeah,
Hmm. I've
I
seen
had one.
the Glaive Adepts look a bit okay in PvP, right? In the PvP timings, but PvZ the damage fall off seems a bit harsh.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. Sometimes it looks really good, and sometimes it just doesn't work, which is kind of how it was before as well. But yeah, I'm not sure.
I think Blizzard is looking at kind of reverting it or doing something to tone it down.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of those ones where obviously they want the adept to be very, differentiated and stuff, but kind of already does just with the fact that it shades around and everything, right?
Yeah, I feel like it even takes a bit away from the shade because like the threat of adept is really like threatening in two places, right? And if you have to commit to the shade to get the bonus, then your actual adepts, when like they're moving towards the base, are a lot worse already. So I feel like the patch, if anything, did make it worse.
Yeah, like you know how like when people do glaive adept timing, sometimes you'd counter it with +1 melee zerglings. And if they got surrounded, like moving out, and they weren't in a nice tight little ball, they'd kind of get ravaged by
Mm.
zerglings, which they're meant to counter. And that's
Yeah,
even more so now, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's actually crazy because you'd be like, oh shit, shade out of there, and it's just like getting a bunch of unupgraded adepts surrounded, and that against melee zerglings, that's actually so terrible.
yeah, for sure.
All right. Finally, I realized what's happening here. My Google Drive was derping. So I was wanting to start off talking about late game as a loose focus, but obviously we can, free range and talk about anything. Do you want to get into Raynor versus Zest on Acropolis to start?
Yeah,
Because I think this is
sure.
a funny kind of talking point game. This is the one where Lambo, maybe a few beers deep, not sure, came up to me after that game. He was like, I think it was Lambo. I don't know. I was probably a few beers deep as well. I was just like, the fuck? Raynor used feedback more than Zest did. He just kept neuroparasiting our Templar, and this was
Processed.
Neural's had its range nerfed. Like this is not meant to happen at all. And obviously everyone is a little bit annoyed at Zerg at the moment, and people are like, well, Zerg's clearly broken still. Look at how OP this is. And I was like, well, this is clear mismanagement of a late game army. And I think that's always a very interesting thing for all of the plebs to learn from. All of us normies, we can kind of get you to point out some of Zest's mistakes, some of the things Raynor did well, and we can start to just talk about, I guess, the main focus in the late game for both players and what they want to achieve. I've also got a list of great questions from random people off Twitter. Well, some which I won't ask, some which I will. But while we get into that replay, and obviously we'll just sync up whenever we're talking at a certain point, we can be like, oh yeah, this. We can just keep reminding each other of certain game timers. So that we can kind of sync up, so we're not talking about different points of the game. But we don't need to, you can zoom around, look at your own things however you want. But I believe the GOAT also tweeted something at us. I think Yuna had a question for you, so we might as well start with that. He says,
Otherwise, just
he would highly appreciate your opinion on flux veins, as a tweet from Mr. Serral himself.
yeah, it's a bit of a meme because at Home Story Cup, Solar was saying that like opening with Void Rays and Flux Veins is really strong. And, like, all the pros were like, no, it's really bad. And, Yuna was like, I don't know, maybe it's good, But yeah, I'm not a fan. I think in late game, there's a place for sure for Flux Veins, mixing in a few Void Rays. It's not bad. I like it actually. But other than that, I don't see so far that it's particularly great.
Yeah, I got to play a ladder game yesterday against Puck, who is a far superior player to me. And I thought I was dead when he was on 7 bases versus my 5, but he made like 35 Void Rays. And Parasitic Bomb's still pretty good against those. I killed them all for very few losses. I still lost the game, which is, a true testament to my caster skills. But they're a great harassment unit. It gives them more ability to spread versus Parasitic Bomb. I think I'm on the same boat with you. Opening Flux Veins is so expensive, man. A Fleet Beacon and an upgrade like that. Oh my god, no way, dude.
And they don't kill anything, really. Like, you fly around and it looks kind of cool. Maybe you pick up a few Overlords or Creep Toma here and there, but in the end, if there's like 5 queens and good queen movement, you can't kill the queens ever.
It's kind of funny, right? Because, what's the highest value target? It's always, in any situation, workers. And that's like the one thing Void Rays can never kill. Even if you find an undefended mineral line, you're going to kill like 6 workers with 5 Void Rays, and they're going to be, running away out of range. You can't get any more. They can kill hatcheries, obviously, a lot faster, but that's a pretty crazy pickoff. And as you said, queens can deal with that. So, alright, so talking about the Zest Raynor game. Obviously, it looks like a Phoenix opening from Zest. I think it was 2-star, right? Yeah, but he stops at about 6 or 7 Phoenix. Gets out some Immortals, some Storm. Goes into a 4th with a pack of Shield Buttress and just goes straight up into the Stargate tech. Obviously, Raynor's teching very fast as well. I'm at about the 9:30, 10-minute mark. Any specific thoughts on this game so far?
I think the 2-star Phoenix is interesting. It's in the last patch went completely away for the most part because of Nidus. I'm not sure yet if you can actually survive it now. But a lot of pros started doing it again, so that's interesting to see. Because it's one of my favorite builds, so if it comes back, I will be very happy. Other than that, Raynor is pretty insane on the drones, I think.
95, man, that's crazy. I keep thinking about, how there was a lot of the no Storm Archon pushes at BlizzCon, right? Yeah. And, Serral was saying they're so hard to stop. Like, when you do that push really well, he was specifically saying, like, Showtime's push is so scary. And Raynor was like, no, it's so easy. He's like, you just make more Banelings. And Serral's like, Banelings don't counter Archons. And Raynor was like, it's fine. You just make more Banelings. And they're having this, like, funny little argument about it. And, it's sometimes, I've seen Raynor since then smash a lot of Korean players who don't spread their Archons out with just Banelings. And I've been really wanting to see some matches, which I'm sure happens on the ladder, where you're facing him with that sort of stuff. That being said, that sort of BlizzCon meta, is that still around? Is it just dead? Are we moving completely into a new zone? Or is that BlizzCon meta just, still relevant?
Personally, I still play it because I think especially against Ravager Ling Bane, it's very strong. And I don't want to play a late game against everyone all the time. Like if you look at Raynor, it's like 100 drones. I would rather not play against someone who has 100 drones right away. But generally speaking, it's not supposed to work. I think if the Zerg is on point with everything, they should probably defend it. Which means probably it's not going to be a super frequent thing anymore. And taking to carrier and late game is going to be a bit better.
if people are just pushing that hive tech a bit too fast, it's like a once in a best of 5 timing attack, just something to keep in the arsenal and make sure, you know, that they're playing honest, right?
Yeah, I think so.
At 12 minutes 40 in this game, Zest accidentally queues up a Nexus at his 4th base in front of it and cancels it, which is great. All right, I'm fast forwarding to the late game now because that is what we really want to talk about. So I guess this is the whole interesting thing is Vipers. And obviously, I think one of the biggest interactions that I'm kind of coming in today wanting to talk about is obviously people using Viper Corrupt to Spore Crawler. And what we saw overwhelmingly at Home Story Cup and in some recent tournaments is Zergs are still winning late game versus Protoss. Chat's angry. The plebs on ladder are angry. People in my Twitch chat are angry. They're saying this was meant to fix it. Zerg's meant to not be broken anymore. Obviously, you know, everyone always tends towards extremes when they're talking like this. But it's really interesting because what I've found is almost every game, the Zerg gets to a point where they have this forward, let's be memorable, let's go with the memorable term, a penis of creep, because that's what this is, through the middle of the map, right outside the Protoss base. 30 Spore Crawlers siege up there, and then the Zerg kind of forces a fight over his Spore Crawlers and starts abducting carriers one at a time. And even when the feedbacks land, one of the biggest things is, of course, the fact that it's not killing Vipers anymore with feedback. This is one of the things which affects this interaction so much. And we didn't notice it as much in the Infestor meta, but we noticed a lot more with the Viper meta where feedback, if you got 1 round of feedbacks on 5 Vipers, like it took them so long to get another 5 Vipers up, right? So this has been a massive shift in the matchup.
Yeah, for sure. And Viper out is super expensive. Like if you have to remake 5 Viper, that's a lot of gas gone.
Do you feel like these games, you know, it's got to be more of a battle for map control where the creep doesn't get so far forward? Because I feel like this army, it lacks as much, it sounds funny to say it, but maneuverability as Infestors. Because Infestors could kind of lock down the Protoss army as it rotates around the map, right? If you got caught by a few fungals, there was a lot of times you just had to smack down recall because you weren't positioned properly. With this army, the Corruptors don't attack ground, neither do the Vipers, right? So it's a little bit harder to, you know, just throw down 50 infested Terrans anywhere on the map. You kind of, I feel like your strength is very much where your Spore Crawlers are. So I'm at the 15-minute mark right now. And around this point where the siege is starting up, Reyno just keeps sucking energy, grabbing a carrier, sucking energy. He's just running back and forwards. So I look at this and I say, okay, well, first things first, obviously try to be a bit better with having your High Templar in front of your carriers and Mothership. That's the first most important thing with this micro. But otherwise, I feel like Zest needed to be a little bit quicker to start rotating around the edges. And he starts doing it about 15 minutes 50 is where I am now, watching on faster speed. But I feel like he's a little bit too careful with this, where if you look at Reynor's army, I don't actually think it can challenge him away from the Spore Crawlers.
Yeah, like the thing for the Zerg is, you never want to take an actual fight, because you're gonna get wrecked, most likely. So you only want to basically pull as much as you can, get energy, pull again, and so on to kind of reduce the army count until you have like a big bang and you can make a lot of Corruptors. But until then, usually I would say Protoss is a bit stronger if you can get your Interceptor out to fight, which is the tricky part. But yeah, never take an actual fight as a Zerg player. So you stay where your spores are and you try to pull while doing counterattacks or while defending. That's pretty much the key for Zerg. And as a Protoss, as we said, what's super important is having the High Templar always like in front of the carrier or depending where the Viper are, always like towards the Viper.
And he kind of messes that up repeatedly in this game. We see many examples of the High Templar doing that, right? And this is where the Mothership does come in handy, right? Because you kind of want to have the Mothership and the carriers behind, but you also want the cloaking field on the High Templar. Because then it demands the Zerg at least bring Overseers forward with that. We've had a lot of questions. There was a question out on Twitter. The Mothership. Obviously, there's such a meme right now. Minus 400, minus 400. They've made it so it can't be neuraled. But it's at the same time that people are using Vipers way more than Infestors. So it's kind of like they're like, hey, we're gonna kill this meme. We're gonna make it so the Mothership doesn't get neuraled every game. And it's like, oh no, people are just abducting it now. It's changed nothing. Is it a useless unit like Roddy says, or is it actually awesome like Lambo says? And you know, a lot of Protoss players are just being lazy with their micro.
It is really strong, but it is also very expensive and very easy to lose. It's just one of the things where I'm like, most brothers put the mothership with the main army, so it's always kind of in a bad spot, I feel like. Personally, I like to have a separate hotkey for the mothership, and then keep it always a bit in the back. Of course, it requires a bit more micro and a bit more attention, and I mess it up a lot as well, but the cloaking alone is super powerful. Also, the time warps can be really helpful now, because they slow down the air attacks as well.
So in this game, yeah, Zest does indeed have just entire army, Void Rays, Carriers, Archons, DTs, Observer. Single sentry in there, so hats off to Zest for remembering to do that. We see a lot of top-level Protoss not have that one sentry for Guardian Shield. I don't know how important it is versus this army, actually, now that I think about it. There's no real range damage, right? Fair enough. It's more important in like a PvP
important
Sky battle, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, his High Templar are on his secondary army hotkey, just 2 army hotkeys for Zest. So would you recommend throw the mothership on a 3rd control group or something like that?
Yeah, that's what I do. I used to have the control group where I had my mothership core always, and then once they removed the mothership core, it was just a free hotkey, and then now I'm putting the mothership there when I have a late game army, so it was pretty convenient for me.
Yeah, it seems really nice because it's like one of those units you want to pull just behind your units. It's like often when I'm teaching people beginner spellcaster usage, I really emphasize this idea that you want the spellcaster, and usually you start with one, like whether Disruptor or High Templar, you want it just behind your front line, but you want it on a secondary control group, right? They've gone and made High Templar a bit easier with the auto attack, but they're still going to go into a pretty bad position. You kind of want them just behind the front line. It's kind of with the mothership the same thing, right? But it's got a pretty good cloaking range, so you probably want it a few spaces back from the front line of your army, just so that it's creating difficulty for your opponent, right? With that cloaking field, but you don't want it in abduct range. I feel like we always want one High Templar on full energy standing like an extra few hexes forward in front of our army, right?
Yeah, for sure. Also, it's also about having vision, because once you don't have the revelation on top of the Viper Corruptor, they can come in from any angle, and it makes it very difficult to have the High Templar in position. So just spreading like a few units, like a Zealot or like 2-3 Zealots or just whatever units you have around your army while you're moving to spot for the movement. Because a lot of times it's just the Corruptor Viper flying around. There's no Brute Lords necessarily nearby, so you can definitely have a few units spotting, which makes it super, like a lot more easy to be on top of the Viper abducts.
So that's actually such a great point, right? The vision. The creep is huge here, right? That penis of creep I was talking about from earlier in this replay. I'm at 21 minutes now. It is still there. I'm actually watching from Zest's camera to really get a feel for this vision. And it's like, he actually can't move to the left, or his army's in vision, just if he's sitting at his central base. And this is so bad, right? Where if I swap to Raynor's vision, he can just keep running changelings forward, which is always one of those things. He's also like setting up overseers in little pervert mode. And you can see, he just comes in, grabs 2 carriers, pulls back. And he does this so well, but it's also, I think this is so easy for Raynor because of the position he's in. What a lot of people don't realize, it's kind of similar against mech. If someone's using like Vipers and Swarm Hosts or something against mech, it's like really easy for these units to be super powerful and always find the angle where the Vikings aren't covering or the Thors aren't set up like in a line. If you got a bunch of Thors in a line, especially the old Thors, they just one-shot Vipers. In this case, it's feedback on the Vipers. Instantly, just shutting them down, right? It's a storm dropping in the middle of the Corruptors, but you need to know what angle they're coming from. But when you've got this much vision across the map as Raynor, it becomes really difficult. So strategically, in my mind, I mean, we've talked about vision, talked about how you want to try to fight as the Protoss if you can, getting your interceptors out on them before they get up to this army and fight anywhere away from the Spore Crawlers, right? Whilst not getting wrecked by the counterattacks. And Raynor did a great job in this game. Constantling, Roach, Ravager, Baneling rebuilt over and over again and just kept sending those in many times. We're going to see a few of the feedbacks go down at 22 minutes. Very cool moves by Raynor. But I feel like I want to kind of go back in this game because it feels like Zest here, he starts losing bases about 22 minutes and he starts getting in trouble. And I want to talk about how do we not get in this position, because I feel like at this point we let Raynor sit on 100 drones for quite a long time, and whilst Zest did kill 1 or 2 bases and did some backstabs, and Raynor's economy did get really small, like I feel like Zest almost wins, and then, okay, actually, 22.5 minutes. We've got to watch this absolute disaster shit show of a fight before we go back and talk about that stuff, because... Oh no.
Void Race.
I forgot this was, I forgot there was a perfect parasitic bomb fumble growth fight that ended this game. Oh my lord. Reynor's economy was really bad at the end as well, so Zest should have been able to wear him down, but he kind of just freaked out here and tried to shove onto creep, and oof, loses all his High Templar right before the fight as well, or loses a lot of energy on them.
Yeah, also, it's kind of what I was talking about how Zerg has a lot of drones initially, but as the game goes on and they build a bit of a bank, they can get rid of a lot of drones. So like sitting out like 50 drones or so, or like 35, I think at the end for Reynor. That's when the Zerg army becomes much more stronger and you can take a fight as a Zerg. So, but Zest, he was still sitting at 60 probes, for example, and his army was really bad. Like there's no way he ever wins a fight, even if it's not all the Voiders dying to final and parasitic bomb.
And I mean, he tries to basically A-move his ground army and storm drop, right? And that's the last thing you should be focusing on in this fight. Like, you gotta have that goddamn feedback up, man. That's absolutely insane. So, let's go right back then. Let's go back to about 10 minutes. I think it was about 10 minutes, maybe. It's probably a bit later than that. I want to find probably 12, 13 minutes. It's when those spores are first getting set up. Because I feel like there's definitely a point where... Obviously, Zest rushed to kind of like the air army off a very small ground army, right? Yeah, that's fine. You can choose to do that. But at some point, I think he needed to get moving before that dick of creep got right outside his 4th base. And he needed to start, you know, hitting these side bases. Because he really messed up Reynor's economy the moment he started doing that. So let's go to... Alright, I want to see... It's probably 14 minutes, I think, when those spores first move onto the high ground outside his base. I think, yeah, if you go to 13 minutes...
Alright, 1 second.
And let's just kind of watch from faster speed around 13-minute mark. I'm at 13:03.
I'm 12:30 now. Almost there.
No worries.
Alright, I'm there.
Alright, so just play from there. Obviously, we don't need to be perfectly synced up. I'm at 13:05 and playing on faster speed.
Okay, I'm on set.
If we kind of watch here, just, you know, is there a window for Zest to go just around the north side of the map and start attacking? Because he starts sacrificing his immortals, obviously wants to kind of max out his air army. I feel like there's no... there's 16 Corruptors already out, right? So he's afraid of going out without having the Void Rays added in, right? Zest is kind of in that defensive mode of, oh, I've got to finish my late game army, or the Corruptors can kill me. Is that the right decision, or do you think Storm's enough to actually keep him safe? Maybe just add 2 or 3 Archons, use Storm? Because we're not looking at 35 Corruptors yet, but I guess, is it hard for Zest to know that? What are your thoughts?
I think the biggest issue right now is that he doesn't have vision on the Vipers at all. So he gets all like 3-4 carrier and the mothership all abducted. And then his army is suddenly really weak, like 6 carrier, whatever's left. So I feel like if he just had Revelation on the army, he could play the defensive game or move around. I think moving around would be the better choice here. Or just preventing the Spore Crawler to get there from the get-go. Because one issue Zest had in this game is he was playing 2 Stargate Phoenix into double Robo and then straight into the air thrust, like you said. And he wasn't doing a particularly great job at denying the creep, even though he could have. Because Reynor was mostly focusing on a shit ton of economy. And then he set up the spore slowly, so he should have denied the creep way, way earlier.
Yeah, he had like one little move out with his immortals, killed the creep just at the front on his side of the grass, and then quickly ran back because he was going into carriers, so he was very afraid of getting surrounded by Zerglings and Ravagers, right? And then Reynor immediately respread the tumors and then just moved his spores forward. Like, it didn't slow it down. It slowed it down maybe 20 seconds or something. Like, it had almost no effect. And there was that Oracle that was AFK down the bottom this whole time. So, I mean, I'm going to be like the hotkey nerd that I am, and, you know, you're the rare... Well, you're the best core user in the world, so you're the most hotkey nerd out of all the pro gamers, essentially. So what's funny is Zest does something which I do a lot, and I've been trying to get better and better at. His Warp Prism, because he only ever uses 2 control groups, 2 and 3 for his army. His Warp Prisms and his Oracles are manually controlled. Now, what he does is he'll often grab his Oracle, which he finally remembered it was down in the bottom left of the map, and he's just clicked it on one of his carriers. And he's going to manually control that by just boxing it or clicking it, and then use Revelation, and then queue it back to follow on one of his carriers or mothership. Cool way to use an extra unit that you're not prioritizing, and it just kind of automatically follows your army. Very easy to lose track of, though. He also does this with his Warp Prism, with his Storm Drop in it. Never control groups his Warp Prism. just kind of does that. And he does lose track of a lot of his units multiple times in this game and these games. So for me, if I was like a Zest mechanics coach, I'd say you've probably got heaps of customized hotkeys you could use with your standard layout. A W, a caps lock. These are all keys a lot of pro gamers, even non-core users use, right? Tilde, the key on the left of your number 1 key on your keyboard. And I feel like the Oracle being so important in this late game, you actually want to have 2 oracles once you're maxed, right? And you want them both control grouped. And you just want to be constantly going revelation, queue it back to safety. Revelation, queue it back to safety. And you almost want there to be overlap on those revelations. So there's 0 downtime between them, right?
Yeah, that would be ideal. And whenever you don't have revelation on the Corrupt and the Viper, you need to be like very aware of your army movement and just try to spread a few units everywhere to get vision again of where the Corrupt and Viper are.
Yeah, just use Zealots, get those High Templar out front, be really watching. I like the Observer on the top right here at 17 minutes that Zest got kind of just sitting there. Sometimes just having an Observer in one of these little areas just sees a Viper flank or something like that. And yeah, landing those feedbacks is really good. So I don't know if we saw any feedbacks in this game from Zest. Obviously that tells us something, but as we said, he was pushed back. It's easy to make mistakes when your opponent's knocking on the door. So definitely, you know, I feel like this is an integral thing, is stopping those spores getting set up. Did you watch Nationwars Neeb versus Serral?
I did, not super closely, but
the Ephemeron game went to late game.
Yeah.
And once again, Serral got a dick right up in Neeb's face, set up 30 Spore Crawlers out front his 5th. And Neeb was like, well, I've got 12 shield batteries, I should fight. But the 20 Spore Crawlers had something to say about that. And even though I thought Neeb was actually in a much better position in that late game, the moment he chose to fight over the spores, I was actually kind of cheering for Neeb, just because I love Neeb, felt like seeing him win. I love Serral as well. But I just wanted to see a Protoss pull it together properly, because I've seen so many Protoss players not quite pull together their late game against this style. And I was like, Neeb's going to show how it's done. And he fought over the spores and just, you know, lost the game in one big fight, essentially. Yeah, I think it was another scenario where the Protoss was a little bit too late moving out and getting out. And as you said here, so I'm going to go back to that same stage one more, just quickly timing this replay, then we can go look at another one. So right around that 14-minute mark, you know, obviously, number 1, push back that creep and don't let them set up spores if you're playing defensive. But I feel like an almost easier way is, you know, as long as you're keeping track of their army and making sure it's not, oh, he's got just 40 Corruptors and nothing else. If it's 40 Corruptors, you just sit at home over cannons and batteries and storm, right? But if they're making spores, vipers, and all this sort of stuff, I feel like, especially like broodlords or lurkers with it, I feel like you need to start pushing around the edges and picking up expansions. And basically just saying, hey, you can't have spore crawlers everywhere. Because there's always a point in the early setup where the Zerg has like a few spores on this top right base. 5-6 spores is not that many. The bottom left, he's actually got 8 spore crawlers. But it's always the center point that has the most, where he's got like the solid, you know, 13, 14 spore crawlers. And it feels like that's always where the Protoss player ends up fighting. So I personally think it's, you know, a big thing with these, you can't miss your timing. It's easy to think it's late game, you can chill for a long time. I think with how aggressive Zergs are setting up spore crawlers, Protoss players have got to clear that out. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Like, especially in Acropolis, this is a very common situation that even though I tried to avoid late game last patch, it happened a lot whenever I got there, where the Zergers creep all the way up to my 4th base, sets up on the high ground with Spore Crawler, and then from there you feel so like pressed into a corner kind of. Because if you move out and the Broodlords push, and you might lose your 4th base, and you can't really push into the Spore Crawler either, so it's very tricky. So ideally, you just want to avoid having spores there from the get-go. So pushing the creep back is really important. That's why, personally, I like to play a bit more active. But if you play 2 Stargate Phoenix, it's really tricky, I guess, to push back the creep and be active.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's kind of like you're putting yourself in a very defensive mode, and it's like it becomes easier to get trapped in that corner of the map, right? It's Phoenix. Ooh, my ground army's weaker than normal. You know, I can't move out. And then, oh, I'm going straight to carriers off just a few Immortals and Storm. Okay, I can't move out just yet. Oh, I don't have Void Rays with my carriers. They're a little bit vulnerable to Corruptors jumping on them. I better not move out yet, right? But it becomes so much more important. I think this is like a StarCraft concept in general. after you've been
think it
defensive
also-
and got an economic advantage, trying to find that moment to move back out and assert yourself, it becomes more important, but also harder to find.
Yeah, I think it's also very map dependent in a way. Because Acropolis, as I said, this happens a lot in late game, where they get the creep there, they get this boss there, and then you push up a ramp into a spore wall, and it's just nothing you can do really to break the position. On a lot of other maps, it's not necessarily as easy for the Zerg to set up this type of contain and then be as active with the Corrupt the Viper.
That's such a controlling position, isn't it? It's even a high ground on Acropolis. So I've hopped out of that game. I just loaded up the Winter's Gate one, though. I think that's actually not quite as late game. I'm also just going to very quickly find the VOD moment, and I'll send you a timestamp of Neeb versus Serral, because that just popped into my head. And actually, you know what? I think I have a lovely helper here, so we can... Any chance you can find Neeb versus Serral on Ephemeron? And timestamp link me? I think my mod might be able to do that for me, so I don't spend too long. Alright, let's just take a look at Raynor versus Zest on World of Sleepers. It's only a 13-minute game, so we might not get to talk about late game as much, but we can just look at some fundamental things, and let's answer a couple of these questions that are popping up in chat, see if there's any good talking points. Alright. Can the adept
Some of my sound settings changed. I can't hear you anymore.
Oh.
I have to restart StarCraft because it's old replays, and now I can't hear you anymore.
How do we fix that, guys? If we recall, does that work? Does it work now? Testing. All right, guys. So we've just got to redo the settings, I think. I think it just took control of your Windows settings. So just reset the Discord ones or the Windows settings to the correct devices, and it should be fine. Silly SC2. So Toby will be able to hear us in a sec, guys. It's just, yeah, it's gone and reset his audio settings on Windows, I believe. You can hear me now?
Here we go.
Awesome. Yeah, that's an annoying bug. That's been happening a lot recently. So a couple of questions. Can the Adept be a late game replacement for Zealots? Isn't the melee aspect of Zealot the thing they're made for? No, the Adept cannot. And the change does nothing to do that. Anything to add?
No, Adept's a terrible late game.
Yeah. Great harassment, cute mobility unit, great harassment, scouting unit, you know. Good early game utility unit. I'm happy with them being in that role as well. What do you and Showtime say about the accusation that Zerg is easier to control than Protoss in the late game? Aha. Ooh, that's
I think it's the
interesting.
opposite. I think it's the opposite.
I saw an interesting question on Twitter, actually, which said they thought this was true for low-level play, but at the higher levels, Zerg is actually harder, but if you're good enough, Zerg is better, is what like someone was claiming.
Yeah, I can see that. I think late game Zerg is actually very, very difficult. Because Zerg players are not used to having a lot of spellcasters, so most Zergs that aren't like Serral or Raynor or maybe a Rogue or a Dark usually are pretty bad in late game, or like worse than what they are in the mid game. So I think, and for Protoss, it's kind of the opposite, where a lot of Protoss are very good in late game because it's carrier storm, you just A-move and storm a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right? If you can get that sweet combo of simplifying your army to spread this part, so it's not hit by splash damage, A-move it, and then land these spells, it becomes a much nicer army. Yeah, it's definitely something where it is really complicated to do a lot of this vision war where you're pulling back, you're going in, you're pulling back because you're trying to dodge storm, trying to dodge fungal and parasitic bomb, trying to dodge abducts. You know, you're trying to dodge the carriers launching interceptors and killing a whole ton of units suddenly. So, yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting one. I think it's really hard on both sides, but it is always so complicated when we talk about what's harder, what's easier in StarCraft. Because sometimes, you know, we've all gone through periods where we say you just can't do this, it's too difficult to pull off or something, right? Early days of Legacy, really simple example, you can't go charge lots with disruptors, you have to go adepts, because otherwise you'll friendly fire your own units. And then people figured out they could actually micro the zealots, and like, oh, cool. It turns out against Terran, charge lots are a much better unit than adepts, so going charge lots with your disruptors is actually way better, right?
Yeah, like it's very much like PvZ late game where last year Serral was already playing the Corruptor Viper style and he was pretty much beating every good Protoss with it. But he was the only one who pulled it off. And personally, I said to a lot of Zergs that if you're as good as Serral, Zerg is favored in the late game, even last year. And they all called me
Wow.
crazy, you know. But I really think it's true. Where like if you get to the level where Serral is at and you can control the Corruptor Viper like him, it becomes very tricky for the Protoss.
Yeah, and he'd be, you know, threatening with backstabs at the same time, and looking for run bys and stuff. But then, yeah, the Corruptor Viper control was always exceptional. And the funny thing is, that's what actually had inspired me. And I remember I started crushing Zerg, crushing Protoss in late game after losing. I thought I couldn't play late game, and I saw Serral do that when he won BlizzCon, and in the months leading up to that. And I've got really good at the Vipers and the Spores and the Corruptors and was like, wow, this is a really good style. And I kept just doing that in my own pleb MMR on ladder for months and months. And, you know, every Zerg fan was shouting at me. They're like, you need to make Infestors. You got to make Infestors. They're OP. I just watched Lambo kill every Protoss in existence with 400 Infestors. And I was like, oh, I really like this Viper stuff I've been working on for so long. And now Infestors are gone. So I'm actually really happy I get to go back to Vipers because it's more fun. Even though it's definitely harder. It's way harder to pull off.
Yeah, it's way more fun as Protoss as well.
It is, isn't it? It's a bit more back and forth, a bit more threatening on both sides. The fungal, of course, was always just the big lockdown, a big blob of infested Terrans, and there was always moments when you're like, oh yes, I can fight, I can push through, and like the Zerg just disengages and like pulls behind the spores and is like, no, like I'm low on energy, give me a minute. And you're like, no, keep fighting me, and vice versa, where the Zerg would be like, I killed your interceptors, and the Protoss is like, I'm gonna pull back, I'll fight you later once I've rebuilt these interceptors. And you're like, okay, neither of us is really trading real units right now. It's just the Protoss ones cost a bit of money and the Zerg ones cost none. Okay, this is kind of lame. Okay, so this was just a standard Archon drop opening, wasn't it, from Zest on World of Sleepers?
Yeah, DT drop. Not a fan anymore, but Zest does it a lot.
It's a little bit too one-dimensional, isn't it? It's one of these things, whenever something becomes so predictable with its timing and doesn't have as much flexibility, it becomes hard to make work. Like, one of the things you can do off this, of course, is warp in more DTs. So I'm going to just, like, when the DTs are hitting, you can try to go more DTs and then like hit multiple mineral lines at once. But like you look at like the top level Zergs and they're so aware that that's the threat. There's Roaches and Overseer in the main, Roaches and Overseer at the natural rotating to the third, Zerglings and Overseer double checking, and he even sees an extra DT warp in. So Zest was going for that punish, right? He was going to try to run a DT in from a different angle while the Archon's hit. The top Zerg players so good at that.
The way Zest execute the Archon drop is very interesting. Like you don't see it like this, like flying the prism in the spot where the mineral line is, or like the mineral blocking thingy, and then have like 2 DTs in main base and then split off the DTs. It's very interesting. I've never seen that really. But it still didn't really do too much. 0 rockets killed, yeah, so
yeah,
not a good opening really.
Gonna rewatch that very first. Let's check his warp in timing. So I always make fun of Zest for not being anywhere near as tight as stats. It's a very cute kind of I can hit every base at once, isn't it? I do really like this. Is like this is one of these things that occasionally a Zerg player's brain breaks. You know, you're warping into 3 bases at once, essentially, kind of. I think it's a very cute way of adjusting it. And you can see his multitask is really nice. He's pulling back the DTs. Does he say he does lose the DT on the right? Yeah. Okay. But yeah.
Like one Overseer defense, it would be really good, but the prison was spotted and then it was kind of obvious what's going on, I think, for Reyna.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it, right? If you go to Zerg who skips Ling speed or something and tries to do like, I have an Overseer and 8 Roaches, and then I go back to droning straight to 70 workers, like which is literally just the Zerg being the greediest piece of shit in the world, right? I remember that got popular on ladder and I was doing Archon drop every game and I was like, how are these Zergs getting so far ahead? And I started watching the replays and I was like, wait, you think you can do this? You think an Overseer and 8 Roaches and then you can just drone with no Ling speed, no scanning? I was like, oh my god. So I just warped in, you know, an extra 40 Ts and won every game by killing like 2 bases in every worker. And I was like, okay, you guys are being really greedy. But that was like a thing everyone learnt off. Like, I think Lambo was a big fan of doing that for a little while. And you'd see like the Denvers do that a bit. And if they got away with it, it was, oof. Really gross. Archon drop, yeah, definitely very abusable. All right, cool. Let's hop out of this game. Let's go find another late game one. I want to try and find a Neeb replay. Should the mothership be immune to abduct as well, or have more hit points? It dies so easily. That's an interesting question.
I think at some point it gets a bit ridiculous because the mothership is a very powerful unit, and if it's neither abductable nor neurable, then what can Zerg do? They just have to take a straight fight or what? I think it's fine.
Fly your corruptors over it and focus it down. It's always like the funny. Every Zerg's had this thing where they're like desperately trying to shoot it, and it's like pulling behind the army, and the like corruptors are walking through multiple storms, and the Archon shots at everything. You're like, just bring more overseers and actually fight the other units. This is not worth it, man. Okay, let me look through this replay pack. So, okay.
I mean, Neeb wasn't at Homestory Cup, right? So.
Oh yeah, we don't actually have any Neeb games from there, do we? Holy shit. Good point.
Yeah.
Oh my god, this keeps bugging. Sorry, Google Drive is bugging really hard for me. So let me see if we've got that VOD link. Oh, we do. Awesome. We can watch this one. I got a link for you on Discord. Check it. And let me open that up. All right. So this is the Nationwars game on Ephemeron from the other day. Does that link work for you?
Yeah, I got it.
All right. I'm going to jump forward to watch the late game fight, and then I'm going to kind of go back and look at the rest. So it's, 19 minutes into the game, about 3 hours and 4 minutes in.
Okay.
And
yeah, I got it.
Felt like Neeb was reasonably well set up, even though his work account wasn't great. Neither was Serral's. They both had big banks. Almost 3-3, 2. So he's got 3-2-1 air upgrades. A few Tempests, decent carrier void ray count. Definitely, I think Neeb could have used a few more carriers. But yeah, Serral he's just keeping him busy on the left with Ling Roach. And then he just kind of pushes down the right-hand side and just shoves these Spore Crawlers up this ramp and uses Broodlords. I guess before we talk about the Spore Crawlers, Broodlords or Lurkers? We've seen Raynor use Broodlords some games, Lurkers other games as the ground support. I feel like that you just use the Lurkers if you were already playing a Lurker mid-game. Is there ever an argument for like, no, Lurkers are actually like just as good or better because they can't get shot down by Tempests?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I feel like it's more of a, if you play Lurker style, you just use them in late game instead of Broodlords. They have same range. They are quite mobile. If you play like Roach, Ling Bane into late game, you probably want to go for Broodlords, I think, because then Lurker just makes no sense if you have ground upgrades or like melee upgrades. I'm not exactly sure what's better, but so far, I feel like it's mostly just how you open and then you go Lurker or Broodlord, depending.
It's interesting. Those Broodlords still very good at this. So watching how this fight actually goes down, I was actually really keen waiting for the Fist of Neeb. I thought Neeb was going to be mega patient, but we see the Broodlings and then also the Infestors coming forward, just using the Fungal as an anti-High Templar spell. They push back the High Templar, an Abduct comes down on a single carrier, and it feels like Neeb just snaps, loses his cool, YOLOs forward into a Parasitic Bomb Fungal combo with all his Void Rays and carriers. High Templar come in behind that from the left and basically come in too late to the party. He's got a pack of Tempests, so this is the sort of fight where he needs to be more patient than ever. Now, did he lacked Revelation? No, he has a Revelation during this fight, so I feel like this is a fight, whereas the Protoss player, you say, this base is dead, I don't even want to keep it. Should have pulled back the probes before the fight even started and just say, I just want to tax the Zerg as much as possible for this and just pick off Corruptors with the Tempest, pick off Broodlords and fall back. But I think the moment that carrier got abducted, it felt like he just kind of snapped a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of Neeb's army, I have to say. I feel like, what did he have, like 5 Tempests and like 6-7 Void Rays and only 5 carrier, I think. Which, the problem with Tempests is they don't really fight. If you're in an actual 5 Tempest, you're probably going to lose because they do so little DPS and they die very quickly. Yeah. Then the Void all get Fungal, Parasitic Bomb, and then there's really only like 2-3 carrier left because 2 got abducted. I'm not sure why he goes for this army. but I don't like it too much. I think you want to really have a very high carrier count. Maybe he just wants to pick off the Viper with the Tempest, but I think you need like 5 Tempests to kill a Viper, or like to one-shot a Viper. But if there's like multiple Vipers, probably not the greatest either. I'm not
How many
sure.
hit points does a Viper have?
Uh,
Gonna do a little bit of maths quickly. I actually have no idea how many hit points a Viper has. Chat, help us out. It's like one of these things.
150.
150?
150.
No armor, right?
I think 1 armor.
And they have, okay, I'll double check these on Wikipedia while we do this. So, because that's actually interesting. It's like, yeah, if you're good at that, like feedback doesn't kill Vipers anymore, but I can do it. So, and a Tempest does how much damage to a non-air unit? A non-massive unit? I think it's like 25 or something. Let's take a look here.
I think it's 30.
30
Wikipedia.
plus 3 per upgrade. Let's assume no upgrades for now. Though, obviously, that would change a bit. 151 armor. So you're doing 29 damage a shot. Okay. So you got 150 divided by 29. It's going to take you 6 Tempest shots to kill a Viper. That's a lot, man. That's more than you need to kill a Broodlord. Actually, it's the exact same. It's the exact same. A Broodlord is 5 with +1, I believe. So it's the same thing. So if you get +1, then it's going to take you just 5 shots, even if they've got +2 armor, say, I believe. That's a lot. I feel like that's also really hard to focus fire with the way people tend to group Vipers with Corruptors, right? So they're all stacked on top of each other. It's really hard to actually click on them. Like a feedback, you can click on them because you can't feedback a Corruptor. So you just click in the middle and it'll automatically hit the Viper, right?
Well, unless there's a bunch of Overseers in the army as well.
Whoa. Oh, apparently I double pressed that. That's weird. Doesn't matter. Yeah, it's the same thing. Chat's making fun of me. Yeah, Overseers are actually really good for that, right? So then you just drop Changelings before the fight, have like 5 Overseers in on top. Obviously, Overseers are a bit faster than the Vipers, but it's still going to complicate things, especially if a few of them are lagging behind before you go in. That's going to make that a bit difficult. So, I mean, if we look at this, he does actually tend to have the Overseers. You see, they tend to go in front of the Vipers, but there are points where they're on top, and it does just complicate things in this game. Once again, let's go back in this game and let's talk about this idea of going around. I like what you said, by the way, about the carrier count, because the carrier is the raw DPS. They're also the unit when normally if infestors run forward, just like a tiny space too far, interceptors will evaporate like 6 infestors in a moment, right? So I definitely think, is 8 the magic carrier count usually? Because he was at 5. I think even just 2 or 3 more makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, as many as possible, I think. Like if I have 8 carriers, I'm not super comfortable in taking a fight yet.
What?
I think
Okay,
if it's getting towards like 15 or so, then I'm like, all right.
Really? Wait, so will you go no Void Rays and just rely on Storm Archon and just have raw carrier?
I like to get like a few voids, but very few, like 3, 4 maybe.
Just a few voids. Okay, cool. Because obviously there's such a good corruptor killer and complicator of kind of the maths, but I like that focus on that where you're like, well, look, obviously Storm and it needs to be used correctly, right? If you're relying on that sort of army, like it's very Storm reliant, it's very High Templar reliant, but you've got so much more raw damage and also range, right? The carrier shoots a lot further than the Void Ray. So one of the problems we keep seeing in these fights is Void Rays can't cover for the High Templar correctly, right? They're too close range. They're not going to kill an infestor before it fungals the High Templar. Carriers can potentially do that. You can kind of rotate 1 unit forward, 1 unit back a little bit every now and then. That's actually fascinating if I think about it in that regard, because it also simplifies your micro a little bit. Whereas what we're seeing is people saying, well, here's my 8 Void Rays to fight your 20 Corruptors. But because they're still trying to focus on their Storm micro and their Tempest focus fire, I mean, these are top pro gamers, so obviously it's like they'll get better at it and they will figure out how to micro 4 different units, but it's very difficult to be as perfect with this. But because of that, they're not actually spreading their Void Rays correctly, right? These Void Rays, we keep seeing them get hit by Parasitic Bomb fungal combos. The High Templar aren't in position to cover them because the Void Rays run too far forward. They're basically handing themselves on a platter to those dirty Zerg spells that are taking advantage of them. So it's kind of interesting to hear 15 carriers. Like this is one of these mind-blowing moments for me. It's like when early Legacy of the Void, we were investigating the Disruptor in this unit. And like, what is this unit? How good is it? How many do we get? And I'll never forget the time Puck told me, oh, you know, I was like, what's the max? Is it 6? Is it 8? And Puck said enough to one-shot a planetary. That's how many Disruptors is there. That's where you stop building them, never before that. And I think it's kind of the same thing, right? Where, okay, maybe carriers are actually this unit, you know, as long as you use your storms correctly to cover them, your feedbacks to stop them getting abducted, they do have some pretty damn good damage, man.
Yeah, and what's also great is once the interceptors are out, your carrier has a lot of range. Like, I'm not exactly sure what the least range is, but I think it's like 11 or 12-ish. And then the Zerg cannot fight the carrier army anymore with the Viper Corruptor, because if I have Revelation on the Viper Corruptor and the Vipers come close, I can just click them with the interceptors and they just die right away before getting an abduct off.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I usually try to go for, where like I get a lot of carrier and I try to have all my interceptor out while pushing the Zerg somewhere. And then I can kind of start killing his army as well.
You pull a Harstem, throw down a proxy nexus, attack it, get the interceptors out, and then kind of leash them forwards onto the actual enemy units.
Yeah, it would make sense. I think a nexus is a bit difficult, but maybe I'm not sure, like having a few sentries for hallucination or something along those lines, or
make a few.
I know on Triton there's like the rocks where sometimes like in the middle base where you can kind of like get all the interceptors out and then go for it. Something like this, because it really makes a huge difference if the interceptors are out before the fight or if they're like slowly coming out while you're fighting.
Yeah, that's this interesting thing, right? Because there's these moments where you just jump on carriers and they're on a move command, and they look like it's like World War One. They're like, Zeppelins are gonna change the game, man. We've got these flying ships, like we're gonna drop bombs out of these Zeppelins, and they were useless. Like they were so bad. And carriers are like that if they're caught, you know, without the support, not shooting. Corruptors jump on them and kill them. And then you have these battles where the interceptors are out and the carriers, you're trying to get out of them, and the carriers are like microing back and the interceptors are blasting units down. And the further you chase them, you know, we know how StarCraft works. Your units clump more. Even if your corruptors are pre-spread or whatever, they're eating storm after storm. You're like, how are these carriers still attacking from so far away? And it looks absolutely insane. Okay, so I want to check out Serral Trap quickly and take a look-see at this one. Acropolis Serral Trap. Let's take a glance at that. So I think, because I was going to ask about that Neeb game, but I don't want to steal too much of O Gaming's content. By the way, let's spam some chats and some links in chat. Helix, if you could do me a favor and link that Neeb game in chat for everybody. Also, of course, guys, we're watching a lot of Home Story Cup replays, and you know, I don't know if you all know this, but Matt Chirino, unfortunately, the page crashed during the Home Story Cup fundraising sellout half hour or whatever it is before the finals. And because of that, you know, I feel like definitely they did miss out on a lot of the support they normally would have gotten. So, you know, we all love Home Story Cup. It was cool to see Kim Fan go and donate $4,000 a few days after the event. If you guys do want to support Home Story Cup, because honestly, this was the most amazing event. It's the first Home Story I've been to. Please do support them. The link is there. The Matt Chirino page is still open. Show them some love if you didn't get a chance to already. All right, so this was a good 22-minute game. Trap vs. Serral. We'll hop in here. I'm just gonna 8x speed it and find some good stuff. So, yeah, I was gonna ask about, you know, should we move out before the spores got set up in that game? And it's like, well, you've got a weird kind of low carrier army of Tempests. Yeah, you're not pushing out of your safety territory with 5 Tempests and a pack of Void Rays in your army. Definitely not. It's the carrier DPS army is the army that can, if your opponent's not in position, you can flank through and just cleave through. If there's 8 Spore Crawlers on their own and their army doesn't get there in time, you don't care about that. You've got 8 or 9 carriers, you evaporate Spore Crawlers like they're nothing, right? So it's only really when their army's all set up over them that it's powerful. And that's why there's this kind of like, if you can keep clearing the creep and going around, even if you're not hitting bases, if you're just clearing creep, picking off a few spores, pulling back, going to a new angle, that's kind of the zone. I'm waiting for a Protoss to do this and Zergs to start all going, oh fuck, this is so broken, we need the Infested Terran back, right? You know, like everyone, I'm waiting for the seesaw on the wine train right now, where we see a Protoss who just keeps clearing the creep, keeps finding the angles, and what's the important thing from that kind of rotational advantage? It's the fact that the Protoss then has the vision advantage. and they're the one landing the spells correctly. They're the one feedbacking. The Zerg can't find the abducts because he doesn't have the creep giving him vision. He doesn't have the forward position with the spores, which he can kind of branch out from and hit all the bases. And that's where we end up seeing, you know, the thing seesaw. So I'm kind of sad that we've seen so many games with Zerg winning, because I'm like, I know there is another side to the coin and we just haven't quite seen it yet. Not very much anyway. So, I mean, do you think that's possible? Because so many Zergs, Loco, as said, you know, I'm not high level, but I feel like maybe this will be OP. I was talking to Lambo and a few other Zergs, and they're like, we all feel like with the Infestor gone, this is going to be too powerful for Protoss. The carriers are just going to be too hard to beat. This Viper stuff is so, you know, so iffy. We're not sure we can actually make this work consistently. And if Protoss is favored in late game, it's going to be really bad for Zerg. And obviously, these are the fears every player has. But I mean, do you think that's completely unfounded? Do you think maybe there's a chance? Or is it just kind of a wait and see thing? Or I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think you're going to kick ass and win every PvZ in late game a few months from now?
I thought it would be very similar to 2018, where it's only Serral who can pull it off, and maybe like 2 or 3 more Zergs are good at it. But most other Zergs will struggle. But I guess since the carrier is a bit worse now as well, like ever since they removed the what is it called, graviton catapult or whatever, it's really a lot harder to use the carrier the right way. Also, fungal is a bit bigger now, so it's easier to clear out interceptors. So it's somewhere in between 2018 and 2019 now, where it's not necessarily super Protoss favored or super Zerg favored. Might be like at a good spot finally, you know. I think Protoss players, since we basically have been all inning the whole year, need to relearn like late game a little bit. So I could see a couple months from now that it shifts a little bit towards Protoss favor.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think it'll be too drastic either. You know, there's just the skill difference as well. Like, you know, Fungal's a bit bigger, but it's just, yeah, there's just players have gotten better at handling the army. They're more willing to, you know, micro these units as well as they can. So the Zergs, I think, definitely gonna stand up well in this time. Very curious to see how it goes, especially interesting to talk about the maps a little bit later. I'll ask you a question or two. So is the standard High Templar Archon drop still good? We already talked about that one. It's a bit too easy to counter at the moment. There are some cool variations and follow-ups and things. At the tip-top level, though, feels a little bit dead. Is the Disruptor going to have a more important place for PvZ in late game versus Infestors? Okay, I'm going to change that question, because Infestors aren't that big a part of late game anymore, but it's more if we see a ton of Lurker mid-games, Disruptors might be big, right? Or do you actually think Disruptors still have a place against Infestors in late game as well?
I think you want a few, simply because of neural. Like, I had a few games in late game where my interceptors ran out, the Zerg took a fight, knew all my stuff, and then what do you do to counter the Infestors, right? And I think having like 2 or 3 Disruptor in there to, especially since neural is a bit short in range now, you can easily pick them off as well. So a couple Disruptors good. As for the Lurker, yeah, I think I'm not much of a fan of Disruptor. In theory, it sounds good, but every Zerg pretty much rushes into Hive now with the Lurker, since you want the 10 range upgrade. And then it's very easy to get Viper as well, and Viper pretty much counter Disruptor completely.
Yeah.
And if you're relying completely on the Disruptor to counter the Lurker and they abduct everyone, it's probably not what you want to do, I think.
If you're planning to do like a Colossus style anyway, like who knows, maybe like 2 or 3 Disruptors will become standard, maybe. But like it's like you can't commit too much to it, right? Because they do just get shut down. I kind of like the fact that like Disruptors force Vipers out, and I feel like if someone makes too much Lurker and Viper, there is a soft spot where they become a bit too immobile. Raynor vs. Hero is obviously not the cleanest game of StarCraft from BlizzCon, but it's a case in point where Raynor's got this sick Lurker Viper count, and then he just dies to Zealot counterattacks, basically. And then he ends up winning the game, but like he was dead. Let's remember that was, you know, Hero and his majestic ability to not finish a game that he'd won. But yeah, it was one of those things where he was like, "Wow, I've abducted all your Disruptors, get wrecked." and Hero was like, "Yeah, but here's 20 Zealots in your base. Like you've spent so much money on Spores, Lurkers, and Vipers, and you didn't quite have your defense set up in the right position, and suddenly Storm, Immortal, and Zealot becomes insanely powerful again, right? Because you just don't have enough of that stuff. I mean, is that something that's more of a theoretical scenario you're not actually going to see very often? Like, is it just too expensive to build a few disruptors in the mid game?
I feel like, as you said, you would have like planned to play like a Colossus style or something along those lines. I think if you go into Disruptor after scouting the Lurker, then it's probably not going to be that great, because it's really like Zerg players get like a 7-minute hive or so and then just straight to the upgrade for the Lurker. And even though, I mean, Lurker are very gas heavy, so you won't get like a lot of Viper.
Yeah.
But if Disruptor is the only thing that fights Lurker for you, and you have like another, like, I don't know, like a Stalker army, or even if you have like a bunch of Zealots, you rely too much on Disruptor, and then if there's really like a few pulls of the Viper, it's just you're gonna get completely owned. I guess you would have to play High Templar Disruptor then.
Yeah, you've kind of got to have like the normal army, and the disruptors are just like a weird bonus, and that sounds cool, but then suddenly it's like, well, what if they actually just get to Broodlords or something, and you're like, I have disruptors and High Templar and Immortals. Like, that's kind of an expensive, weird army where it's going to massively delay your air transition, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really see it happening. Like, even in the past, whenever I try playing Disruptor against Lurker, like, it's kind of okay, but it doesn't feel very reliable in a way.
People can dodge even without Lurker speed. They can dodge disruptor shots, like if they're on point, right? So as good as it is to put on pressure, it's like the fact that you can't reliably land disruptor shots even on a non-upgraded Lurker. It's like, oh, maybe this ability isn't that good. It's hard to really pile on the pressure. Can we go to 12 minutes 30? Because I just learned something. So I knew you could pull back quickly from a stasis and get very few units trapped. I didn't know you could completely dodge them.
Oh yeah. The circling is really quick.
It's bullshit, man. Serral's a god and Zerglings are bullshit. This is insane. I've watched this like 6 times in a row. This at 12:30. I'm like, what the hell? How do you dodge it? Every single Zergling, man. That's crazy. And obviously, the stasis has a little bit of a delay, which is part of its strength. Because if it went off instantly, it would only ever catch the front of a big blob of units that run into it. The delay is there so that it allows a full blob of units to move into it, and then it activates, which is how you trap, 40 Zerglings at once if they're not watching, or 20 Marines at once, right? But it's cool to see that, obviously if the Zerg has godlike reactions and instant response time, that's very cool to see. So this is yet another game here on Acropolis, big map. Very kind of big defensive map. Serral was up at like 90 drones earlier in the game. If we go up towards the later stages, there's a couple of big creep dicks across the map. He's got good map control. He's kind of been the one hammering at Trap all game. So Trap's not coming into this from an even position. He tried to play Colossus and Disruptors, almost all of which have died. He's trying to go into air at this point. He's trying to push back some of the creep, create some space for himself. But it definitely feels like this has been all Serral so far in this game. Would you agree, or do you think it's a bit more even?
No, I think Serral's definitely in control here. And from what I remember the game, he kind of fell apart against the Baning run bys and stuff. So yeah, tough game. It's a bit interesting that he took the linear 4th base, because that makes Baning run bys a bit better against the 3rd base at least. And I feel like he really struggled to defend his 3rd mineral line from the Baning run bys.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes tough. It was interesting. I mean, he ends up going for the 5th in the north, but he does end up spread very thin. I like that he eventually puts a full energy High Templar and a few Archons down there, and an Immortal, and a pack of cannons, but that's very expensive as well. Leaving so many units at the southern base to defend Baning run bys. And it's usually something you do after you lose a shitload of workers. You're like, you don't usually have 2 Archons, a High Templar, and 4 cannons waiting for the very first run by. And and then even the later run by at 16.5 minutes, it's like he almost has enough, but not quite. And he's losing probes there. Let's see if there's any point where this late game looks a bit more even or doable for Trap. Because I feel like Trap's a pretty competent late game player. I think he's a little bit stronger than Zest. Like, I've seen Zest lose control of late game fights a lot. I think Zest is much more of a mid game monster.
Yeah, for sure. Like, Zest is just a timing attack player these days.
Yeah, I remember, I'll never forget, I think it was a game on Catalyst he played in earlier Legacy, and he was way ahead, and he started just rallying Like he won a fight, but he only had technical units left, and he decided to push into the Zerg's rally with like an Archon, 4 High Templar, and like a Zealot, and like 3 Tempests or 6 Tempests or something. And then all he was rallying was Tempests and High Templar across the map, and like it was just the strangest thing, because like it's this thing which I have as a player, which is like I just mentally fall apart sometimes, and Zest sometimes I feel like it really has that as an issue where sometimes he's not familiar with the situation and it's like he has no idea what to do, and you see this drastically different Zest, right? It's the Zest that floats 2,500 minerals 6 minutes into the game every now and then, where he's kind of confused about what his next step should be. It's not quite planned out, and he seems very unsure of what he should be doing. That's definitely like one of those things I feel like trying to develop plans with for him as like a mental coach if I was working with him. And I'm kind of surprised that, because he had those issues back on Pro League teams as well, I'm surprised they never kind of sorted that out, because I thought like there's such a single clear issue with him, you know. It's doing a cannon rush, bringing 1 probe, losing the probe, having 2,000 minerals, waiting 30 seconds, and then sending 3 more probes across the map to continue the cannon rush. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like, this is not what a pro gamer should be doing. But we all have our moments of weakness, right, where we fall apart. I'm sure you've had games where you sometimes just absolutely break under pressure, and you're kind of looking at the game and going, what the fuck did I just do here? Like, and it's one of the hardest things to look at, right? Because you're like, I normally play so good. That's what I identify as. Like, that's my level as a player. And you see yourself play this entirely different level of StarCraft. You feel a bit of like self-disgust. How do you deal with that as a player?
It's really rough. Like, usually it's in a, I don't know, like a best of 5. It's 2-2 tournament live on the line, and you're just like, you're not thinking properly, and then just maybe you're facing something unfamiliar as well. It's really terrible. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's
hard.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much you can do really. It's just, you know, like even to Serral it happened at BlizzCon, right? 2-2 against Reina.
Oh yeah. He did not want to talk about that game for a while after that.
Big lead, and then all of a sudden it just slips out of your hands.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just happens. Just best is to just forget about it and move on, and yeah.
You know, it's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot, and how, you know, when I was competing, I think I was one of the most psychologically frail players, like really bad at dealing with this stuff. I think there was occasional times I'd watch the replays, I'd watch the VODs, I'd process, I'd think about it, I'd really let myself feel that pain, absorb it, give myself like a set time. I did this maybe one tournament ever, one big tournament loss where I played like shit. But I actually think it's like such an important process to give yourself the time to focus on the pain, accept it, and like it's so fucking hard to just focus on that pain, like, you know, and then forget about it, right? So like you say, like, just forget about it. I think a lot of players, they want to go straight to the forgetting step, and I think it's like so important for you to process it. Otherwise, it's like it's wedged in your subconscious, just waiting to come out and make you doubt yourself, or to make the same mistake at some point in the future, because you haven't really given yourself to focus on and say, that's, you know, I fucked up, I made that mistake, happened because of this, you know, I can learn from it, it sucks, it hurts, but I've given myself the time to really process that and deal with it. I think a lot of players try to jump straight to the next step of, let's pretend that never happened. And I think that's like really dangerous as a competitor.
Yeah, I guess you should always try to learn something out of a loss, but yeah, I'm like this as well, where I'm like, I probably wouldn't go over like a VOD that I played where like I really messed up, you know, like a massive throw or something. I probably wouldn't want to watch the game anymore.
So this is something I've been wondering. I'm like, I think maybe it's worth watching those games. And I don't know, you know, but this is like just I've been listening to a lot of people from like other sports and competitions and thinking about this mental game, and StarCraft's such a mental game with like confidence and processing your losses and learning from mistakes is so big. And I've been thinking, like, I'm like, you know, would I have done better if I watched all of those games and forced myself to give myself that time? Because I feel like it doesn't hurt anymore. If you force yourself to sit there and feel that pain, like, it's gonna hurt really bad at that moment, but then it's gone, right? Like, because you processed it and dealt with it. So I'm like, part of me is like, you know, if I was like, you know, if we had a $20 million StarCraft industry and I was a full-time coach with a team of like you and I'm coaching Team Germany, right? You and Hero Marine and Lambo and whatever. And I'm like, no, like we're gonna, okay, a week later when you've calmed down a bit, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna watch the VOD, we're gonna absorb it, even though this was a game where you know 99% of what you did wrong and you know it was a stupid throw that you probably won't do again. Just for like the psychological strength you get long term from watching that replay. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it would be useful. Even on ladder sometimes when I lose a game stupidly, I feel like I feel better if I watch the replay. And I'm like, okay, I was in a really good spot, I just messed up this thing and then I lost. Like just knowing why you lost. And maybe also like questioning what your game plan in the situation was can be important. Because I feel like usually when you have like a big throw, it's when your game plan is kind of wrong.
I agree. Like there's, even if, and sometimes you know what was wrong, but you don't really know. This is like a really dumb, you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, Pig? It's just silly words. You're just saying, what I mean is like there are some minute details of really having it sunk into your brain. There's knowing on a surface value, I fucked this up. And then there is another level of that. There is another level of you realizing, go to 18 minutes 30, by the way. I want to watch this recall maneuver. There's another level of you really knowing the tiny little minute details that led to you making a bad decision, right? That led to you falling apart. It's, I did a dumb thing, don't do that again. But it's a lot of what, so Gary Kasparov in Life Imitates Chess talks about a lot of his lessons from being a chess grandmaster that you can apply to real life and being, the world champion and stuff. I believe this was Gary Kasparov. I think I'm thinking of the right book. I haven't read it. I've read a few excerpts from it and heard it paraphrased. But basically, he talks about how a lot of players, when they lose, they're trying to say, fuck, I did that dumb thing. Let's never do that dumb thing again. And he feels like the problem there is you can play millions of different games of chess. And it's the same with StarCraft. There's millions of different things that can happen. You can focus on learning that one thing and fixing it. Or you can go and you can make it so you're actually addressing the system that led to the mistake, right? So he would always say, wait. I made a bad decision. I don't want to do that again. But what's more important is, how did I make the bad decision? What led me to that bad decision? How can I change the underlying system that led me there? And I think when we don't absorb a big throw or a loss, especially a very emotionally painful one, the ones where it's tempting to say, let's put that to the back of our mind, it's easy to ignore a system that's in place that could lead us to the same category of mistakes. It might be an entirely different matchup, but it might actually be the same system of something in the way we think or the way we choose our strategies under pressure that leads us to that, right? Whereas if we sit there and process it, sometimes we start to identify some underlying things. So I don't know, I personally found that to be something which really opened my eyes. Even as someone who's obviously not properly competitive, someone like you these days, I see it in my own play when I lose a game to a Villa or someone who I really don't want to lose to on ladder, and I'm like, I'm not looking at that reef. I'm not going to think about it. And it's like,
yeah,
if there's usually some system that's going on that's wrong, and if I can fix that, it gives me so many more wins and so much more confidence in the long run.
Yeah, I agree fully. Like, it's easy to point out where you lost the game, but why you made the bad move and why you even made the bad move is much more important to figure out.
So this, I really like this abduct maneuver. Someone had asked a question on Twitter, I can't remember who, but big shout out to them. They'd said, is Protoss missing Vortex? Do they need a big move? So going back to like 1830, 1840, when he tries the 2019 Vortex, which is the forward recall, the aggressive recall onto the army. And I remember watching this in the audience. I was standing there, I'd just come back from the toilet, and I was like, oh, he's going to abduct the mothership, nice. And Trap's like, I'm actually trying to recall on your army. He's going for this from before. Like, he's like, dude, I'm getting dicked in this game. I gotta go. And then Serral goes for the abduct, and I was like, that was a millisecond from finishing. That recall was really close.
Yeah, it's funny because I was watching in the player area, and I was going through the VODs because I was busy doing, I don't know, water ball or something during the games. And Trap was like walking by, he saw that I was watching the game, and he was telling me how he thinks it's a really good move, where like he tries this in many games. I think also at BlizzCon he did against Raynor, kind of an accident, but he does this a lot where he recalls on top of the Brood Lords, and then he has a few Archons below.
Yeah, it actually
worked though.
It was above the cafe against Raynor on this map, where it was like this just above Trap's middle base. It was that exact area against Raynor. He did it, and he almost obliterated. Like, he almost won that game after getting bullied a little bit throughout that game. But unfortunately, the Broodlords weren't instantly one-shotted, obviously, because they were all above the dead space. So they were kind of, some of them were getting hit by Archon here, and the main Archon there. They were all like hitting individual Broodlords. But if you get on top of their army, like in that clump, if that recall finished, Serral's army literally does a disappearing trick. Like, the Archons will just obliterate. There was 9 Archons in his army, I believe. I think there's at least 7. He's got 6 left now, but I think it was like 9 Archons at that point. Like a crazy Archon. He's clearly gearing for it. You don't want 9 Archons with your maxed out army normally, unless you're doing a move like that. Speaking of which, you talked about 15 carriers. We want to have 5, 6 High Templar, 1 or 2 Oracles, maybe a couple Observers. How many Archons do you tend to go for with your maxed army?
I think it depends when in the game it is. If it's like a very late game, then I would say 0. Like, I don't think Archons are too useful in like a super late game army. Usually you just have a couple left over from the mid game or so.
If they've still got like a lot of Banelings in the mix, you'll be like, oh, I'll have 5 Archons up front to shield my High Templar kind of thing? Or is it more just... I mean, normally I think of them as anti-corruptor, but I guess they can be shielding as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would probably just put my High Templar under Prism or something, but... yeah, I guess like a few Archons is not too bad.
So as this game gets to 21 minutes, obviously, I think after that recall failed, yeah, I think Trap kind of went for that one recall. Now, he's only got 4 or 5 Tempests here, which is nice. The other kind of funny little disagreement Serral and Raynor have. Raynor says Tempests are literally the worst unit in the game, and Protoss are so dumb for making them. Serral says that you should have enough to one-shot a Broodlord. By the way, guys, if you ever make fun of myself, another pro or a streamer for not knowing unit stats, Serral had no idea how many Tempests it took to one-shot a Broodlord. I was talking to him about it. He's like, I don't know, what do you need, like 7? I was like, it takes 5 with +1. He's like, oh, okay, so you want to have 6 in case one dies. And I was like, okay, fair enough. So, because I'm more on the side of Tempests are a very weak unit. And
me too.
I feel like they're very nice in a static position where you're picking away at each other, but we keep talking about this creep dick and why it's the anti-Protoss maneuver if they get the spores forward. I think Tempests don't stop that happening. They allow you to chip away at that, but that opens up so many opportunities for the Zerg to have the vision advantage, to branch their counterattacks into your bases. And yeah, your Tempests are going to pick off a Spore Crawler one a minute, and you will eventually win the game if the Zerg doesn't do anything in the meantime, but their damage output is so goddamn low. And it just kind of ends up being really tough, I feel, for the player to actually contest at that stage of the game. So I feel like you've got to, your idea of just go super heavy carrier, the idea of stop the creep getting forward outside your base, getting the spores there. But also, if you can't fight that, if it does get up, quickly branch into the counterattacks. And the thing is, what often happens, right? Like if we go to like, I mean, obviously it happens very late in this game, so it's not the normal scenario and Trap's kind of pinned back, but at that point where the spores come forward at 19 minutes, if that happens at a more normal earlier time, I feel like you just branch around. Like Trap keeps doing this, threatening around the edges, but if they move all the way far forward and then you kind of sneak through the north of the map, you hit this northern base, quickly attack that. As they're running all their units back, you pull back, and sometimes within that movement, especially if you keep the revelations down, maybe you steal a watchtower or you have a spotting observer or 2 on the edges, you start landing feedbacks on Vipers, which get you a massive respite, gives you a massive breathing zone, gives you a minute or 2 where they can't really engage you properly if you feed back all the Vipers. And sometimes their army's caught running back between bases, and you can clear 20 Spore Crawlers in a few seconds with a lot of carriers, right? You can actually just bust through and clear a whole section of the map. It's very hard for this immobile Zerg player to be everywhere. And this is something which, obviously, I keep kind of, hitting home really hard, because I think it's something where we're seeing Protoss players let the Zerg dictate the pace with one of the slowest, most immobile, most inflexible Zerg armies in the game. And I think it's great the way Serral's doing this, and maybe he can always force this, but I think it's the Protoss players' jobs to make this a bit harder for the Zerg to set up and get that creep forward, get the Spore Crawlers forward. Obviously, there is a very serious battle around the backstabs and the counterattacks, which the Zerg players keep finding damage with. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of details where there's like going to be an arms race as well for, oh no, I'm leaving 6 cannons and 2 High Templar at this base, or I'm always building a gateway wall at my 4th or 5th base, right? The southern base on this map, if it had 2 gateways with cannons and a High Templar, it's going to be much more powerful against these run-bys. So, I mean, I think there might be a little bit of an arms race there for defending the flanks with static defense, or maybe the Protoss players will up the ante and start running around the edges of the map with a lot of zealots. What I've found traditionally, and this is actually something, as I say this is popping into my head, it feels like the Zerg army generally has more fun running around the map mobile, right? It feels harder for the Protoss player to have their main army somewhere to split off just the right amount of, say, High Templars, Archons, Immortals, and Zealots to go contest that Ravager Baneling army, right? Because if you don't land the Storms, the High Templar and the Zealots just disappear to 10 Banelings, and suddenly you've got a few surrounded Immortals and Archons, and you've lost way more units than them in what essentially is a skirmish on the side of the map.
Yeah, I agree. Like, this is something Serral does very, very well, where it's like he keeps doing the run-bys. A lot of Zergs, when I play, like Elasa comes to my mind because I sometimes play late game against him, where it's like all of a sudden, nothing happens anymore. You know, like he's just camping behind the spores, I'm just camping behind my cannons and making carrier, and like there's no run-bys, nothing. Which makes the game like very easy for the Protoss. But Serral always has like this small force that's running around and threatening it the whole time. And at the same time, the same force also his defense for Stellar run-bys. Because like Banelings clear out the Baneling super easily.
That's friggin' awesome. Awesome. So we've got Tempest, High Templar, Army, 3 control groups for Trap, by the way. Just wanted to check that. He does not control group his oracles. He's on the back foot in this game. Everything's very scrappy. I'm going to jump through a few different points and check his control groups. He does, actually, no. Yeah, because Trap is one of these... He's like a foreigner Korean. In that he's like a macro god. He's like one of these guys who likes going to the next stage. And he's very organized with like his control group. So he uses an oracle control group. So he's a 4 control group guy. If he had a warp prism on the map, he might even have a 5th control group. I'm not sure.
He also doesn't hotkey his mothership. I think he just clicks it on one of his carry or tempest to follow.
Okay, earlier in the game it is control grouped with his army.
Oh, okay.
But I guess later... Yeah, later on maybe he uncontrol groups it.
Because that's how I do it as well, where I'm like, I have the mothership on a separate hotkey, but I basically just click it on a unit. And
so
then
that you're not having to move 3
up,
control groups around at once, because that's a pain.
Yeah.
Serral, on the other hand, of course, is usually very good with his control groups. Corruptor, Overseer, Viper on 2. Ravager, Roach on 1. Infestors on 4. Creep Queens on number 5. Actually, that's just all Queens, sorry. He's not really using them on the front this game as much, but he does bring them into the fight sometimes. He's also got 2 Queens on number 9, which is normally his injecting Queens, I believe. But he's gone and sent the other Queens. He's very fluid with what his units get used for. That's one of Serral's big strengths. He's very quick to swap. No, this does this, this does this. And you watch him in ZVT when he's engineering a surround or splitting units into backstabs, and you see units flitting between control groups. But sometimes they don't do that. Sometimes it's the same control groups, he just changes. This is actually now a run-by group. This is now a main army group. Now you guys are all on the main army. I love the way it's like his brain is very plastic. This is what happens when you play StarCraft since you're like 8 years old. You've got an older brother. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, my hotkeys have like a very specific like thing that they are used for, you know.
It's very rare. The German handicap.
Like some hotkeys are flexible, but a lot of them are like, for example, a High Templar. Actually, like some I use only for specific units. Like a War Prism, for example. I have a hotkey that's only for War Prisms or ever. Or like what else? I have like a couple of those where like it's just one unit, it always goes there. But being flexible, it's really good for sure.
It's really nice. At the same time, it's like you want to always develop systems in the chaos, right? In a game like StarCraft. So, you know, what you're doing is like, especially the right advice for most players wanting to get good. Like, you know, I can imagine someone hearing this, they're like, oh, you be like flexible. And they're like, wow, like I just put a different unit on each control group every game. Like, no, like what's so fluid about Serral is like, he's still very organized and systematic. It just means he has more systems that he can swap between. Just to make that, for anyone who's you know, not clear, it's not like he's making it up on the fly. There might be a little bit of that, but he's saying, oh no, like I've actually thought about this and said like in this scenario, it's this is going to become that, and this will become that, and these will swap around. And it seems like he's making it up on the fly because things are shifting, but it's something that he's actually kind of planned out ahead of time. So this has been an awesome conversation. I don't want to go too much longer because I'd love to have you on in the future. I don't want to make it too much of a troublesome thing. I also think it's good to have a nice digestible conversation like this about ZVP. So final thoughts. Obviously, it's kind of like waiting. We'll see if there's any other really good questions as well that I haven't answered. If there are any really tip-top questions that you guys think are really worthwhile, Helix, if you can repost those to me and other guys post them in chat. I'll continue to talk about it after we have Showtime off. But for now, ZVP. Oh, fine. Before we talk about that, the map pool, Showtime. Is it good? Is it bad? What do you think?
I haven't decided yet. I think like for me, the new maps feel mostly all right. I would say Sen is really weird to me, but I'm not sure it favors honestly.
What
Some
about
of the
the
maps are really
wide
tough.
open areas on the third bases on both Nightmare and I'm trying to remember the other map that has a really wide open third? Has this been problematic at all? Do you think there'll be more of these? It's like, oh shit, suddenly just a big Ravager Ling or a giant Ling run by is actually scarier? Is it harder to hold on to the third? That's what a lot of regular ladder players have been struggling with. It's an adjustment having such a wide open third for a lot of players who aren't as experienced out there.
It doesn't feel too different. I feel like even like Acropolis or World of Sleepers, the maps we already had like very like large spaces everywhere. So to me, it doesn't feel very different so far. But it's just also because I need a couple hundred games on the maps to be sure who it favors and stuff like this.
It takes
so,
a while, doesn't it? Yeah. People always want answers after your first few games, People often come to my stream, they say, you're a random player, you're a grandmaster random, you must know. And I'm like, guys, it's going to take me like a month to get more than 5 games in each matchup on each map. Because I'm playing 9 matchups. Like, it takes me so long to figure out anything. I get to the end of a season, I go, I think this map's really bad. I think this map's really good. And it's like, it's after everyone wants the feedback, but it does take that experience. What about Simulacrum? So this is a map with quite spread out bases, and it's a shorter rush distance in general. We can talk all matchups in general here, but this is the map which I feel like is going to be the most different in some regards. It's also got a massively wide open main base kind of drop area and Nidus area.
For me, what I don't like about the map for PvZ is that there's no space behind the bases whatsoever to like fly around oracles or anything.
Yeah,
it feels a lot like World of Sleepers. Back there. It feels a lot of World of Sleepers in that sense, where I think it's a Zerg map because it's just very hard to arrest and everywhere it's wide open. So Banelings and stuff like this is really good. So I'm not a massive fan of it in PvZ.
And so one last question, which we'll finish up on here, or a last few couple of questions. So we do want to talk about Swarm Host Nidus, because people are still up in arms about it. Let's open... I'm going to look at Zen while we talk about it. Yes. People are saying... I was talking publicly. Like, I've had, like, one guy who kept tweeting at me. He's like, someone just won with Swarm Host Nidus. You were fucking wrong, Pig. The Nidus worm... It was clearly the Swarm Host Nidus is still too strong. And because I made comments saying I think they've nerfed the Nidus enough. But Swarm Host is its own beast, which they buffed a ton. Remember, it used to be like 200 minerals. It's 100 minerals, 75 gas now. 3 supply, not 4. They buffed it a lot way back when. And we're essentially looking at bigger map pools than we used to have. Swarm Host is still incredibly good on it, right? They're insanely good if they can get in range. And because the Swarm Host Nidus doesn't really care about the strength of the Nidus in terms of, it costs a little more, but the unload speed doesn't really matter, right?
Not as much, yeah.
There's a beautiful spot next to the main base in Zen. People are calling this base the Swarm Host Nidus staging area, which is just perfectly set up. Do you have to play Stargate and just zap that down with oracles? I mean, Swarm Host Nidus on Zen just seems so good down there.
Yeah, I've played a couple of times against it, and it's a nightmare, honestly, because everywhere is cliffs, and I feel like every base is attackable by locusts. It's not fun to play against Swarm Host on this map.
Yeah, I mean, you take the third up to the left. There's a great spot over that ledge. You've got down here is so hard to get through. I only realized the other day that when you go through the middle, it's not... The gaps aren't in front of each other in that tall grass as well. When you're going through that middle, you got to do a little S-turn, little S-bend through those little mineral paths to get through there. And can an Archon fit through there? I'm not sure. I think it might only be a single space gap, which means like Archons, tanks, and Thors, I'm pretty sure can't fit through. Immortals,
I think tanks get stuck.
Yeah. Any 2 hex unit gets stuck there. So
Yeah.
swarm hosts. I mean, if we want to address swarm hosts nidus, it's not about the nidus worm at this point, right? It's about two things. It's map design, and it is the swarm host potentially being a little bit more expensive, right?
Yeah. I think it's like the whole Swarmers Knives. I think like pre-patch was insanely broken in a way. I think it was beatable, but if you messed up a little bit, like one Nidus got up, you usually just lost the game right away. While now, it's a bit more. You can deal with it a bit more easily, because if you kill a Nidus right away, you get some downtime. Like there's not going to be a Nidus right away in the other corner, so it
Yeah.
feels a bit better. But at the same time, um, of course, the Swarmers is still very strong. Like it's the same as before, right? It's very cheap, but it really depends a lot on the map. I think I had a game against maybe it was Lambo on World of Sleepers because before they patched out the rich gas, and he was doing like a 63 throw and Swarmers roach attack, and you can very easily go through the middle on the map, and it just felt like impossible to deal with because you have so
Which
many
map was that?
roaches, so
Sorry.
many World of Sleepers.
World of Sleepers. Yeah.
Like it felt almost impossible to deal with. So it really depends a lot on the map.
Yeah, maps are huge. We recently, of course, had a whole bunch of discussions. The Pylon Show had a Mapmaker edition, and we've recently, obviously, StarCraft community, very hardcore community. A lot of people put their passion into this game. People get very angry when things aren't the way they want. And, thankfully, we've been talking to a lot of map makers, and they've been kind of saying, hey, I made this map a year ago when balance was different, when design choices were different, there were different influences, so... I think, obviously I always want to promote people being a little bit more patient. I love the passion. I'm not saying don't criticize. I'm just saying you don't need to be so aggressive about it. But more importantly, I think maybe we can all campaign Blizzard to try and get a quicker map turnaround process. And that we can try to factor maps into the balance in a more transparent way. How we do that, I don't know. It's not easy. I've always said Blizzard has a terribly hard job balancing this difficult game. But yeah, there are some times where we're like, hey, Zerg's really powerful in the late game, and then we saw a map pool come out for BlizzCon. You weren't happy with it. You were publicly tweeting. A lot of people weren't
Yeah.
too happy with some of the balance that went down at BlizzCon, and it's because the maps were too big. So, I mean, I've been incredibly vocal about this, as it was Roddy's idea, and he's been campaigning about it for years, and I think he's just heard no response from anyone. So I've taken up the helm and said, guys, Roddy has the best idea, and it's BlizzCon should be played on maps from the entire year. It shouldn't be played from the last season when we're just figuring shit out. I personally would want the top pro gamers who qualify for BlizzCon to all kind of have some way of voting for the maps. I'm sure someone's going to be upset no matter what, right? No matter what the maps are, but I think that's going to be a fairer system, right? Where you say, okay, we've got the pro gamers all say, this is the fair balance pool. We're going to take Ascension to Aya, Odyssey, Abyssal Reef, whatever, right? You get this conglomeration of maps because we ended up with a point where, hey, the Nidus has been buffed because we want people to use it more. People have finally figured out how to use it. We have the biggest map pool basically ever with so many good Nidus Swarmhost spots at a point where Swarmhost has been buffed a year before. People have forgotten about it because they've been playing... I mean, it was used on Cyberforest and whatever that other map, Kairos Junction and stuff quite a lot.
Yeah.
You didn't even need a Nidus. But there was a lot more push and pull back and forth. And then suddenly it's like, wait, the Nidus is really strong. The maps are huge. How do you punish swarm hosts? And you get to their side of the map and you make them use them defensively. And we'd have these games. The Protoss player pushes into the middle, is like, haha, look at me, I'm scary. And Rogue's like, just sticks his finger up to the fucking camera. I felt like I could see him do that. And he's like, no, I'm going to unload all 20 swarm hosts in your base, kill 2 Nexus and your fucking Twilight Council and your Templar Archives and go home and defend, because you're like, oh, well, I don't want to push too deep. But apparently, that was the right call. And this is why we saw people all inning on 41 probes, right, at BlizzCon. It was like 41 probe Immortal push. Oh, you have 3 Roaches, 8 Zerglings, and you were trying to build Swarmhost Nidus already? Like, the Zergs were just being so aggressive about how fast they were going to the Swarmhost Nidus, and it forced the Protoss into this corner where they felt like, well, I've got it all in, kind of blind. And when the Zerg just went, oh yeah, you're all in, cool, I'll just make Ravagers and crush this all in, because it's a giant map. It's not a good map for an Immortal push. And that kept happening. And we saw this pattern where ZVP, I think at BlizzCon, was probably the worst we've seen ZVP for quite a long time. And I think you'd agree with that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it didn't feel very nice because I felt like even now, I feel like Protoss is a bit limited in what builds we could use because of the maps. Because if you think about the map pool we had, the previous one basically, where you had Cyber Forest, Kairos, and so on, there were like a lot of timings Protoss can do because the maps were a bit smaller. A lot of all-ins as well. Like Zerg was for like a month or two was really struggling hard against the robe all-ins and stuff.
Yeah.
But then for BlizzCon, I tried like so many different builds, and nothing really worked when I played against Serral. Where I was like, okay, I feel like 3 Oracle, and you just try to play as perfect as possible, and you hit a pre-brutal timing is probably the way to go. But then of course there's Swarm Hosts and stuff. So yeah, it wasn't very fun, honestly.
Yeah. I second that. So I think things are moving in a better direction. We're going to have to keep giving feedback and getting the balance going. And I'm going to try to take a more active role and be a bit more responsible myself as someone who's going to try and gather some feedback. And I'm going to try and start doing these sort of shows because I've really enjoyed this talk. Final question before you go. Charge, new charge. Yay, nay, or undecided?
I would say undecided probably. It's very hard to say. Like in some situations, it's very nice to have the super quick zealots, like just for like a flank or like a counter attack. And sometimes your zealots go in and they don't really kill anything, and you're like, what the hell is going on? So I'm not sure yet. I would say they feel slightly worse.
Slightly
But not
worse, but
Slightly
still
worse.
undecided for the moment.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Any shout outs or any love you'd like to show, any fellow pro gamers you'd like to tease or shit talk before we let you go?
Not much shit talking really. Just thanks to Makers, of course, my team, and thanks everyone for watching, and also thank you to you for having me. It was really fun, and yeah, I think that's it.
Any more streams this week? You guys have got Nation Wars like Sunday. I think you guys are playing Nation Wars, right? Oh no,
no,
sorry,
we lost.
sorry. I
Yeah, we
watched
lost
your
against
games
France,
yesterday.
sadly.
My bad. I was expecting. Yeah. Sorry, man. I'm like
Yeah,
I
we
was.
expected
Yeah.
to win as well.
Apparently Clem's on Adderall. Apparently, guys. Sorry. He was playing like a psychopath lately, man. He's been so good this season. I'm really keen to see what he does with WCS next year. But yeah, much love, man. So streams this week. Can people catch you there?
Yeah, I think so. Since this month there's nothing left really. I think I have like in 2 days the WSG qualifier. So probably like after that I will be on with many streams.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to throw some links down in the description of the YouTube, guys. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to click like, subscribe, support the Patreon if you feel like it. But more importantly, go to Showtime's link down there. Click his stream. Give it a follow. Give it a sub. I'll also put a Twitter link there for you guys as well. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.